Okay, I have to talk about this with you because I noticed a huge change in my body and the way I feel compared to just a few months ago. I feel so much less inflamed. My hair got so much stronger and healthier. I have so much more energy and just overall feel so much better in my body. And there's really one thing I focused on during the last months, and that is to really reduce my cortisol levels and regulate my nervous system. And let me tell you, this really changed my life completely. And I think I could probably talk about this for hours, but if I had to choose 5 things that I did that made the biggest difference, it would be the following. First thing is that I changed the way I work out. If you've been following me already, you know I'm a yoga and Pilates teacher, so obviously that's kind of like the main part of my movement practice. But I had some periods in my life where I tried to integrate a lot of cardio. So going for long runs or going to HIIT workouts. And I was actually always wondering why during that times where I would be so consistent with going for a run several times and really pushing myself super much in these workout classes, why I would actually feel so much more exhausted, why I wouldn't see any results in my body, why I actually would even gain weight during those periods and just overall not feel great at all. And I didn't know that intense cardio, and especially these HIIT workouts where you're in studios with super loud music, it's so dark, there's an instructor who's shouting at you and pushing you, that actually causes so crazy much stress for our bodies, and it really just skyrockets our cortisol levels, especially if you're in the second half of your cycle, so in the luteal phase where our progesterone is super high, which makes us feel much more exhausted. We have so much less energy. My point here is not that you shouldn't do any cardio, of course not, but to be super mindful about how much you're doing, when you're doing it, like where are you in your cycle, and just what is the intensity of your workouts. Because for me, I really realized that when I focus mostly on low impact workouts, yoga, Pilates, and go for long walks instead of runs, especially during the second half of my cycle, that I feel so much better and that I see completely different results in my body. So that is my experience. Of course, we need to keep in mind everybody is so different, and what works for someone might not work for someone else. But what is definitely true for every woman, that during that second half of the cycle, we really want to prioritize low impact workouts, reduce cardio, and especially not push ourselves too much, and just be really mindful with the intensity of our workouts. So making this change had a really big impact, but I actually think that the next thing was even more impactful, and that is to really pay super close attention to my nutrition and make sure that I'm getting the right nutrients. So focusing so much on having a whole food diet where with every meal I'm trying to integrate healthy fats, protein, and complex carbohydrates. So really trying as best as possible to have all 3 of those, but especially protein, and especially in the morning. So making sure the first meal of the day is high in protein. The difference that makes is insane. I'm saying that all the time because it's really crazy how big of a change I felt once I started implementing that. So making sure you have a high protein breakfast, because what it does is it helps to balance our blood sugar for the whole day ahead. Because if we, for example, start with a high carb meal, we have a super skyrocket blood sugar right away in the morning, and that then causes a roller coaster throughout the whole day, which makes us feel so tired, no energy, disrupts our hormone, and again spikes our cortisol. And with that, it's also really important to remember to not skip meals. That causes so much stress for our bodies. It's really literally one of the worst things we can do to ourselves. And by that, I don't mean intermittent fasting, which is something that can be effective if it is also, again, adjusted to our menstrual cycle, which is a whole topic in itself. But in general, not forcing yourself to not eat when you're really hungry. Always listening to your body and not starving ourselves, because that just really has the opposite effect. It's not gonna make you lose weight. It's gonna put your body in such a high stress state that it's gonna hold on to everything it can. I, by the way, just filmed a whole what I eat in a weekend with lots of high protein and nourishing breakfasts that I'm gonna link for you up here and also down below. So yeah, we want to always make sure we give our body all the nutrients it needs, and prioritizing the high protein breakfast, which also means no coffee on an empty stomach. And I was doing that for the longest time. I would actually have a cappuccino with oat milk on an empty stomach, which is like the worst thing you can do to your body, because Oat milk in itself is super high in carbs, and as I just explained, that's gonna cause a roller coaster for our blood sugar. And having coffee on an empty stomach is the worst for our cortisol levels, putting us in such a high stress state. It's also not so good for our gut health. So in general, we wanna eat first before having coffee. But that brings me to the third point, which is to limit caffeine. And let me tell you, I'm a huge coffee lover. I love the taste, the smell, the energy kick I get from it. So yeah, it's really a tough one for me to kind of reduce it to a minimum. So I try to have maximum 1 coffee a day, but ideally actually also mixing it up with not having it every day, but then for example having matcha instead, or also some days with no caffeine. But for example, matcha is a lot better for our cortisol levels because the caffeine enters into the blood much slower and it's not causing that spike, which then also doesn't cause such a big drop. Just in general, trying our best to keep our caffeine intake as low as possible to just not cause more stress for our bodies and keep that cortisol level low. The next thing is something I feel so passionate about because of how much of a difference it made for my life and the way I feel, and that is to fully focus on regulating my nervous system and healing my nervous system. I think we all know about the fight or flight mode, which is our sympathetic nervous system, and the rest and digest mode, which is our parasympathetic nervous system. And we really want to try to increase the time that our bodies spend in the parasympathetic nervous system. And one of the best ways to do that is yoga nidra, which is also called NSDR, non-sleep deep rest. To me, it's really become one of my favorite things to do because of just how crazy much it affects me and how much I feel like it heals my nervous system. And how it works is that you lie down and then you put on a recording. I have, by the way, a recording both in English and also in German on the mindfulness app. I'm gonna put a link for you down below. You can actually try it for free for 30 days. So in a yoga nidra recording, you're being guided through your whole body. So bringing your awareness to each body part and fully relaxing it. And it feels like just walking on clouds or just floating. I don't know. I love it so much. So that is one thing I try to do regularly. Another thing is breathing techniques, which is something that within an instant calms your nervous system. One of the breathing techniques that has, I think, the fastest impact is the physiological sigh. So you breathe in twice and exhale. So doing this a few times, super simple, super easy, and it immediately communicates to your nervous system that you're safe, that everything's okay. So it really allows you to calm down and relax, especially if you're, for example, in a stressful situation. This is really powerful. But I try to do some kind of conscious breathing whenever I think of it. So during the day when I'm, for example, in the queue in the supermarket, I try to take super deep diaphragmatic breaths, so breathing fully into my rib cage all the way down into my belly, which is another really powerful way to calm the nervous system. Or another one I love so much is the, what is it called? I think 3 or 4, 7, 8, where you inhale for 4, then you hold the breath for 7 and you exhale for 8. It's actually also a breathing exercise that's really good if you struggle with insomnia because it helps to fall asleep faster. That's actually something I'm struggling a bit sometimes, that I cannot fall asleep, and I really notice a huge difference when I'm doing this breathing exercise regularly. So I swear to you, it works. These things really work. So we want to make use of them. So that was number 4. And number 5 is prioritizing rest and prioritizing yourself. I think we really live in a time right now where it's so celebrated to hustle and work so much and kind of like priding yourself with how much you're able to work. And I think that's so dangerous because we need rest. Our bodies need downtime, and we really need to allow ourselves to do that without feeling any kind of guilt, which is just so ridiculous. So I really want you to say no to anything that you feel like doesn't serve you and that's just too much. Where you're like, I don't have energy for this, this is too much. Saying no, practicing saying no and prioritizing yourself and your needs, and especially also prioritizing your sleep, which I think is, if I had to choose just one thing, it would probably be the thing. Prioritizing a consistent sleep schedule, going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time. The difference that makes is just undeniable and so big. So putting our sleep on top of the list of priorities. Having a good nighttime routine where we don't look into our phones or laptops or TVs, where we really focus on calming down, getting ready for sleep, and then being super consistent with it. And I'm still so mind blown just how much of a difference it made for me to implement these 5 things, and how I can just feel it in my whole body so much. So I really hope that these tips help you as well. Definitely let me know in the comments if you have any kinds of questions, and I hope I'll see you in my next one. Bye bye.